Hello, everybody. This is the Kubernetes SIG Architecture community meeting for January 28, 2021. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Please remember to follow our code of conduct and treat each other with respect. And I guess that's it. So let's get started. Hippie Hacker, looks like you've got the first 3 agenda items. So why don't you take the floor?
Thanks for that, John. Just a quick conformance subproject update. Without going through the slide set, maybe we condense it down since I've got a couple of other agenda items today. We're still sticking to our 30 endpoint goal for 121, stretch goal of 40. We're at 3 points merged, which is, it doesn't look like a lot, but that's because we have to wait 2 weeks for a lot of stuff to soak, and we've got a few things in soaking. I'm still hoping to hit that 30-point goal by the end of this release. I think today we're starting to focus on updating some tests to clear out those last few endpoints in 1.10 and 1.11. There are 4 remaining there. We also saw that for KubeCon Europe that we're going to have need to do another talk for that, so we're going to submit something there. Some of the underlying things flowing directly into it. Any questions about our update, or anybody want to know stuff about conformance? We usually do the obligatory go visit the API Snoop site and look into the chart up to the right. When you look at that, it's a little bit of a lie this time, and I'll tell you why. Is we have metadata inside our conformance YAML that gives you the date that or the release that test was promoted and becomes part of the conformance program. When we update those tests, we add a comma and the date that it was updated. So there looks like a lot of progress in 121, when in fact we only have 3 points. So we're just going to have to communicate that as we go. We've looked at different ways to make that look more truthful, and they all require a lot of work. And so we're just going to make that caveat every time, at least for this release. Hopefully we won't hit so many tests we're updating, because most of the other things for the rest are completely untested endpoints. And we do have a couple of endpoints that look like they snuck in as far as GA, and that's because of the next topic, endpoints ineligible for conformance. There's a link to a conversation there on Google Groups that I sent out that notes that this is actually for our conformance. I think we made that the links backwards there. That first link, if we bring it up and share it for the conformance testing for V1 apps and status, is about clearing out the 1.9 data set, and that's us working with the SIG apps group to try to figure out how to fix all of that. So some of this, it was noted that status endpoints are not user-facing. Usually status endpoints are hit by controllers, and they're a bit tricky to test because the controller is constantly checking the status and updating it. And it tends to be our approach to set the status, ensure that we were able to set it, and then ensure that the controller reset it back to what it needs to be so that is happening. I guess that's one of the topics I wanted to bring up today was, do we want to continue to include status endpoints in conformance? Or do we want to, because people could write their own controllers and whatnot. That's what was kind of where I was thinking that we need to continue to test status in Subresources because they are part of the operation IDs and surface area of the Kubernetes API.
Yeah, I mean, right, conformance isn't just for things people consume, but also for things machines consume. And if you broke status, or status didn't work appropriately or as expected, that could break people's automation. So I would certainly think it needs to continue to be in conformance.
it would be useful if we could weigh in on that on the thread, so I can point back to that to say, we brought this up within SIG architecture, and here was kind of our consensus. If you have other thoughts, please feel free to look at that.
Okay.
And let me go back to our agenda. So, and here's a deeper thing is, if we click on that list of ineligible endpoints, it grows as we find things that, in this case, and we're about to add some more because of those three new endpoints that are actually part of an alpha program. But there's 75 endpoints here, and the tracking of the operations of Kubernetes that are not part of Conformance is a list that's written in SQL within the API Snoop repository in the CNCF org. Yeah, not exactly accessible. It feels like it's in the basement, you know, during the Vogon fleet coming in and like, hey, we warned you, those things are destined to not be looked at. And it might make more sense for us to have some metadata somewhere, and maybe it's in the Kubernetes testing EDE test EDE conformance folder, where we add a list at a minimum, just a YAML list of something with endpoints that we have deemed not okay, not part of conformance, and why, so that those can be tracked as PRs rather than my team trying to make sure they don't show up in the list of things we're tracking.
Yeah, that would be the simplest, quickest solution. Just put a YAML in that right next to conformance.yaml that's like lists each of these and why we've deemed it as something we're ignoring. And then the same, when you want to add one, it's the same people making sure, approving that shouldn't be in conformance.
Awesome. Well, then our team will put forth the first PR, and it will include this list of 75 ineligible endpoints and our reasons. And we'll make that
I'm
PR.
looking, as I stare at this list, there are things in there that seem to me like they should be eligible, except that they require, vendor modules or something. I'm looking, I see CSI, persistent volume claims.
Yeah.
It seems to me like, for the purpose of conformance, shouldn't we be able to define a phony implementation so that we could verify the conformance of the cluster behavior without depending on any particular vendor?
Totally. And maybe that's saying that it's ineligible for conformance right now. The reason has to be to remove the target area now, so we can see some progress.
Yeah, but
we could separate that into. Go ahead.
I was going to say that would require us to install those, which may not be valid in a conformant environment. That's partially why they're in that. Like, you can't just install a random CSI driver on someone's cluster and expect them to be okay with that for that current.
Okay.
The reasons things are inside that list vary, and they're not always because we never want them to be part of conformance. If they're vendor-specific features and we can come with a framework and a way to test that, then I'd love to pull them out of not eligible at the moment for conformance.
So this gets back to like what Clayton's comment gets back to, like a sort of, we're trying to make this the conformance suite serve two purposes, and one is for vendors to verify that their distribution or managed service is conformant, but we also want customers, users, to be able to run that conformance suite and validate their cluster. But really, it's not so much of it's not designed around validating a specific cluster, yet people are using it for that. So I don't know that we have the bandwidth. Ideally, we would address those in two different ways, and I don't know that we have the bandwidth in this group to do that. Like, I don't know that anybody stepped up to kind of build a conformance suite for running in production clusters. So we kind of fudge it by just not letting certain things. We do mark certain things as disruptive, and those aren't run when users run it in their own clusters, whereas they are run by the providers. But beyond that, we don't really try to address that. It's like it's just become too much of a hill to climb.
in order to submit to the CNCF case conformance repository, you are required to run some destructive tests, just so that's super clear. People may not want to install those in their normal day-to-day operations, but as far as making sure that they do offer something that is, Kubernetes conformant, that's where that should be running.
Yeah, so maybe we need to extend that and not just disruptive, but like tests that mess with your cluster in more substantial ways. But yeah, I think that's an interesting topic for discussion maybe at the next conformance call.
Excellent. We'll add that to the agenda. I just wanted to make sure we had a broader view here. And then the last thing, we've come up a couple times against this, whether we go to SIG API machinery or if you're trying to track what is our list is our own opinion within the API Snoop team. And our original opinion is if the URL, the path as part of an API did not include alpha or beta, then it became GA. And that's not exactly true. There's lots of little exceptions, which are, if it's one of our ways of getting around that is adding it to ineligible endpoints, which is not accurate because at some point later when they do get promoted, we want to catch them. And we thought about, we kind of keep our own metadata around that. So the most accurate and authoritative place for that is going to be to encode that metadata within the Swagger JSON. And another possible thing that might be useful, I don't know if it's within Swagger JSON, but would be tying it together with the feature. And then if this is part of the KEP process, it kind of ties in multiple places, but on the KEPs, the list of the API operation IDs. And I think it does, we do currently attempt to track the feature flag. But in this case, for this group, just tying it down, do we want to, is this a completely SIG API machinery thing? But I wanted to be like a request from SIG architecture to engage in that in a more formal way rather than me walking over and saying, hey.
Well, you walking over is totally valid, but we did talk about this like a year or two ago, and it was, essentially we kind of tabled it because just API machinery has so much going on and didn't have the bandwidth to, it just didn't bubble up to the priority in their environment. But of course, if your team or somebody else involved in conformance can, lend a hand, maybe there'll be review bandwidth for it. I don't know, but it's definitely something we can talk to SIG architecture about, or SIG API machinery about here. But you're totally have all, it's open source, man. Go do it. Like you don't have to ask us anything.
So hold on. I'm looking through here trying to figure out what are these things that are using API v1 prefixes that aren't v1. And I'm not finding the list. Is there a list or some examples?
Just go to apisnoop.cncf.io front page and scroll down to the first three on the list. It's patch core, read core, and replace core, namespace, pod, empirical containers. And there's lots more.
I'll have to go look at these.
Go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, I was just saying I'm gonna have to go look at these to try to figure out what path we followed to end up in that, because it feels like just high level, like we took a left at Albuquerque and we shouldn't have ended up here.
Well, it looks like, Tim, those are sub-resources, right, of pod. So that they're falling into the V1, the ephemeral containers is going to fall into the V1 because pod's V1. We don't have everything's at the group version common level. We don't have field specific
Well, one could argue that we should not add sub-resources to a stable API group. We should add them to a beta API group until we GA the sub-resource, just like a regular old type. Right? We wouldn't add an alpha type to core V1. We would add it to V1 alpha or V2 alpha or something. We actually do really poorly at this.
Rion just dropped a link to the PR for the promotion, which discusses this particular one, and I think there's also the comment on the how the machinery adds it at that point. It's valid to understand why and how we can change that in the future.
I yield my time.
All right, Happy, what else do you have for us?
I think that's it. I'm not sure what to do with the beta API conversation as far as ensuring that we create that. That's kind of an architecture conversation. So that's another email to the list to try to get some consensus. But that's almost like a policy, like a Kubernetes community-wide policy change. But that's all that I have as far as topics of conversation.
Okay, well, yeah, I think that's probably then the place to start would be to mail the list and see if we can get, and let's talk to API machinery about this and see, get the ball rolling with the right people there.
Yeah. Thanks.
I see Dim's just commented. Is Liggett on the call? I don't see him. All right. Well, thank you. And it looks like we got an update from the enhancement subproject too. So I don't know if Jeremy, Laurie, or Kirsten wants to pick that up.
Hey, I think we're gonna ping pong that and cover a little bit of different stuff inside of it. Is it okay if I share? We made some slides just to so we didn't have to talk to bullet points on a Word doc. Is it okay if I?
Yeah, figure out how to do that. So that's you're gonna share, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Oops. Do that. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Zoom makes it so hard.
It's not that hard. Just click the button. All right, you're up.
Okie dokie. Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple of different things, kind of a Venn diagram of release and enhancements, because they kind of, there's a lot of things that go hand in hand there. So we'll start off with some changes in 121, some changes that we're looking at for post 121, like 122 and beyond, and then just some general updates around the subproject itself. So we'll start off with the 121 updates, and Kirsten's going to take that.
Forgot to unmute myself. I'm a professional software engineer. So are the slides okay for everyone? Just to make sure. Cool. So a brief summary for 121 would be that we are starting the transition to the new enhancements process. And this transitional period is sort of shifting the ownership of the CAP process from the enhancements release team to the SIGs themselves. So it's basically opt-in versus polling. What we were doing previously was polling. I'm sure all of you are well familiar with me and other people continuously pinging you on issues and on Slack about whether or not an enhancement is a part of the release cycle. Now we have for 121 an opt-in issue, an opt-in process where we're asking the SIGs to tell the enhancements team, the enhancements release team, what enhancements they're targeting for 121. This is pretty awesome, honestly. The process is basically that the SIGs will go to a special sheet in the enhancements tracking sheet, so we're still using that. And by SIG, let the team know what KEPs they're targeting for 121. So instead of me or anybody bothering 200, 300 enhancement issues in the repo, the SIGs and the SIG leads are going to come to us and say, hey, like these are the 5 KEPs that, you know, we're going to be working on for the enhancement cycle. These are the ones that we've already thought through, and you know, you don't have to worry about the rest of them. They're going to enter those in the tracking sheet, and then the process is going to basically proceed from there. The tracking sheet is going to be still the source of truth. So if you want to know if the SIGs have any enhancements, what enhancements they're targeting for the release, it's going to be on that sheet. And then we're going to migrate those issues over into the normal enhancement sheet and then track them as at risk, fully tracked, etc. Go through the enhancements and let the authors know like what they might be missing. This is going to be super helpful for the enhancements team. Like there's a lot of, in prior releases, there was a lot of really sort of trivial work that I feel like nobody really liked. Like we didn't like pinging, you didn't like getting the pings. There was also a little bit of ambiguity. Did the right person get the right ping? Did they see the right ping? Did they know about the issue? And it was very author centric. And this is really like putting the responsibility on the SIGs. The SIGs are the people who have to maintain it. They're the ones who have clarity about whether or not they have capacity to review these PRs, to review these KEPs. And frankly, they don't have capacity to look at every single enhancement issue, every single release and say yes or no. So this is hopefully like a streamlined process. It's also going to allow SIGs to plan more, to be able to say no more, and to just have like a little bit more control. And this 121 is the first step in the process to a more streamlined and then eventually automated KEP collection process. Yeah, so I guess that's my, do I have another slide?
Can I ask a question there?
Yeah, go for
So,
it.
Sure.
One of the things that, oh, it looks like Tim's has his hand up. I didn't want to jump in front of you.
It's okay, John, go ahead.
One of the things I shadowed, or I shadowed on that team for a couple releases, and I do recall that it was not unusual for me to ping somebody and then be like, oh, right, I forgot about that. I need to get that in. And you know, obviously that's not great on their part, but you know, it's human. So I'm wondering what do we do? You know, we used to take that list. I know Bob had written an automated script in the sheet that would populate it. I'm wondering, how do we educate the SIGs that their responsibility they have to be more proactive, right? Because they've been reactive and they're accustomed to that. So how do we go to them and say, look, you need to do, like Enhancements Freeze is coming up in 2 weeks or less right now, and you need to like sit down and go through this list and make sure you've put stuff in. Otherwise, you're gonna be too late. Like
that's a really good question, and I think like proactive versus reactive is kind of like the biggest pain point. That's perfectly summarized. What we've been doing is the enhancements lead, along with the shadows, have been reaching out to all of the SIGs and letting them know, and you know, keeping them updated, sending emails directly. I mean, it's actually almost easier because there's a limited number of people that you have to contact SIGs, as opposed to this like infinity group of authors that you may or may not be able to get into contact with. Like we frequently have authors of KEPs who are no longer active, and we're pinging basically the wrong person. So this also picks up that process where, you know, the SIG actually wants to work on this, but they're not getting pinged. The author is, you know, working on something else now. So we've been actually super proactive on the enhancements team, trying to let SIGs know about the process, keeping in communication with that. And it's been really great about updating the tracking sheet, just sending out updates with the tracking sheet, explicitly saying, you know, hey, these are the SIGs that we have KEPs for. If your SIG is not on this list, we have no KEPs, which is also a really clear message, as opposed to previously where it's like, hey, here's like this large spreadsheet. You may or may not be on it. You may or may not, you may or may not be able to ascertain like what exactly is it, what status. I think that we're having very like clear communications as well. So we've been proactive, and I think that the way that we've been proactive is more effective this time because the messaging is a lot clearer. So yeah, like the enhancements lead and the shadows are posting in the Slack channels. They're emailing to the SIGs. They're emailing to KDev. So I think
Okay.
that it's really targeted, and we're doing what we can, but I do think that it's more productive communication this release as compared to last release.
That's great. Yeah, that makes sense that it would be, now you're targeting those outreaches.
Mhm.
You're still doing outreach.
We also hit up the chairs and tech lead meetings, both of them, for the month, to just make sure that we're trying to get all the communication avenues covered for this.
So I have an idea,
Tim?
but I'll wait until my slide to share it.
Okay.
But it just
I think
came
Tim's
up.
had a question.
Yes.
I still have the question. So are you going to add another date by which the SIGs have to enter their information into the tracking sheet?
We pondered this. Honestly, this was something that we were thinking about, and then we thought, hey, like having this sub date kind of sucks, right? Because you're also trying to review KEPs at the same time. So the enhancements freeze is still the enhancements freeze. Like if you want to give people a heads up before then, like that is highly, highly recommended. But if you put it in the last minute, I mean, that's kind of on you, but it's still going to be held to the same standard. So you're kind of missing out on the opportunity to have other people get other eyeballs on it and let you know whether or not it's met all of the criteria by the date. But we thought that we did have that discussion, and we thought that it was just too many deadlines. It's like,
yeah,
you have to let us know, and at the enhancements freeze deadline, we take that list and we make sure that they all meet the criteria, and then that's that. If you want to put them in the list sooner, Anna and the shadows are going through those KEPs and interacting with a lot of the authors on that list now, saying, hey, like you still need test plans, you might still need a graduation criteria here.
So then the next question is, other than the communications and the proactive help that the team provides, what do those basically, what is this what is the stick, right? Like, how do we make sure that people do the right thing? So what, other than the positive stuff with the engagement and like things like that, what do they lose if they don't put it in?
I mean, the deadline is still the deadline. And if your enhancements are not on a tracking sheet by the deadline, you have missed the deadline. Like that's part of the requirement for the inclusion of the enhancements free, is letting the team know, saying this is in 121, this should be tracked.
So if they don't enter into the tracking sheet by the feature freeze deadline, then they can't ship that feature.
Yep, exactly. This is the same as if we have 100 issues and we're pinging the authors over and over and they basically never reply. If you never reply on that, I mean, you can file an exception after the fact and say, I know you pinged me like 6 times, but I didn't reply at all. It's the same thing, except we're not pinging every author now. We're asking the SIGs to tell us what they're intending to target.
Okay, so let me poke at it a little bit more. So what we are saying is they have to mark the KEPs properly in the Kubernetes enhancements. They have to make sure that the metadata is correct. They should make sure that the milestones are set correctly in the KEP that is checked in. They have to update the Kubernetes enhancements issue related to the KEP and keep that up to date, right? If they do those 2 things, but if they don't put it in the tracking sheet, then it's still, they can't merge.
This is a relationship between authors and SIGs. If the author is doing everything but not telling the SIGs, that's also what we want to avoid.
I understand, Kristen. I'm just so that all of us are on the same page on what will happen, right? So that's what I'm poking at, so that we can support you in this decision-making process. Like if the release team says, this is what we're going to do. If the issue is up to date, KEP is up to date, everything is checked in, everything is LGTM'd, approved in enhancement repositories and merged, but they haven't entered into the tracking sheet, then we will stop them from shipping. That's what
So
we're doing at this point.
We don't have that stick right now. People can still merge things, unfortunately. I mean, we've had this over, putting my release hat on, we've had this a few times. Like there were things that don't end up with enhancement tracking issues or KEPs that get merged in. Like in 118, the client Go updates, there was no KEP and no enhancement issue for that. It was just like a really big change to client Go. Like there's a new context parameter that goes into everything. And we have one or two of those every time. And we handle them in a best effort kind of way. Like there is no enforcement, if to merge into KK, there has to be something in the enhancements repo.
I'm trying to get you that, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I want to get it in an automated fashion because the tracking sheet is disconnected from the GitHub stuff. Yes, we can do better in 122, right? If there's an automated stuff and we tell them, look, yes, you've done everything here, but no dice, right? So that is the missing part here. And that is the stick that you're going to get when we move it to a YAML file or something later.
This was more of a transitional period where we're trying to we can't, the old process is unsustainable. We run into a lot of issues like authors get left out, they get the wrong impression, SIGs are overwhelmed. So this is like a transitional release before we're totally automated. And a lot of SIGs have also been taking advantage of it by organizing themselves a little bit better, taking a lot of responsibility for the KEPs, saying these are the only ones that we're doing. Like, we don't have to talk about the rest of them. So this isn't the permanent process, but this is like the transitional step, because also like we don't have the stick. We've never had the stick, and that's kind of been also like an underlying problem.
Got it. So the last question I have is, say some set of features, since we are rolling out just now, fall into this hole, right? Do they ask for a exception and then update this tracking sheet for 121?
You would need an exception, but then I would also ask for a bit of reflection of why a SIG was unaware that a feature was merging and couldn't tell anybody. Because this is a little bit different than usual, where the authors merge it without the SIGs really knowing. So that would also be a point of like reflection of like, why are we merging features? Like, why are some people merging features, but that's not seemingly in the plan of the SIG?
So you will be forcing the SIG chair and the TLs to file the exception and not the authors themselves, because it's just an email, right? Anybody can do it, and that typically folks will just go ahead and send an email out for an exception, right? So how are we forcing the author and the SIG leads to talk to each other, so so the SIG leads can get a sense of like why they missed it? Sorry, I took up too much time. I'll stop here.
So we'll enforce that the way we would enforce it before. I think every time we would, when we were proactively reaching out to people and doing the polling, we would tell them, hey, you need to open a exception request for this, or respond on the issues. Hey, you need to open an exception request for this. So I think it just becomes a communication task on the part of the release team, and we'll definitely push for that this time around. Going forward, it will be a PR. In 122, when we move to the enhancements process or the receipts process, which is what we're going to talk about next. Again, like that'll be more automated. It'll be much easier for us to put some gating and some enforcement in place for that.
If I could just say, I think especially in this transition period, it would be really helpful, I think, for SIGs if there can be a sort of reconciliation process where you look at people who have done it. Like if they've already, if a SIG has approved a KEP and the metadata in the KEP says that it's targeted for this release, but it's not in the sheet, it's likely they just didn't know or forgot or weren't paying attention to the process changes. So we may want to do some GitHub queries or KEP control queries to pull out anything that's targeted and cross-reference it at some point and just ping those SIGs. I also think that, you know, our KEP process, that theoretically SIGs know what they're doing, but actually anybody can list anybody as an approver. I guess the owner's file only lets SIG leads approve KEPs in the enhancements repo. So there should be some awareness by a SIG lead who's approving that. So yeah, we should, I think we should do that reconciliation, that cross-reference, so that we make sure people don't just inadvertently leave it off the list.
I mean, if you're a SIG and you have a list of enhancements that you're preparing for a release cycle, you could review those during your meetings, have multiple people aware to watch out for enhancements and track them, and then you delegate the job instead of having a SIG chair do all of it all the time, or however some SIGs manage this. This could become a group activity by bringing visibility into your intended workload for the upcoming release cycle. And then discuss this in the group, figure out what to do.
I think that's great, Lori. I think you have a higher confidence in the organizational level of our SIGs than I do.
Well, I mean, that's why I'm presenting help on slide 11. But like, we are doing this in SIG release a lot, all the time now.
Yes.
Like we've been able to stretch the SIG in such ways to involve more people to actually make this real. It's not even a theory anymore for us. It's real. It's happening.
I think it's wonderful. I'm just saying that the big SIGs may be very organized and have a lot going on, and so need that organization. There's a lot of SIGs with literally just a couple of people that participate that may not be aware of what's going on. So it's not, so we just have to be sure.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is not like a blame game or like you should do it a certain way. But, you know, usually with a SIG, even if you're a very busy, large SIG, if we have 52 enhancements going into release, you're probably in charge of 8 to 10. So it's just really a matter of choosing those 8 to 10 that you want to prioritize and get in. And that can be where the discussions happen in the meetings, which are already taking place anyway.
But also just as a point, there's quite a few SIGs that have already started participating in the project. I mean, in the new process. Like, I know that there were at least 5 or 6 that are actively getting their KEPs together. So it's not the case of like one SIG is like doing it and everyone else is like, I don't know what's going on. Like, people are being pretty responsive about this. So I'm quite optimistic about the process and the process of moving to a more automated process. Like, people are doing it, and it's pretty cool to watch, if that makes anybody feel better.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool, so we'll move on just in the expediency of time. Just a quick one for PRR. We have the enhancements team has been reminding people that they need to complete the PRR. It seems like not everybody is super aware of that, so we've been pointing them to the prod readiness channel if they have questions. So be on the lookout for those people coming to ask. People started to see like KEP val failures, and they're like, "Why is this failing? I didn't know I needed to do this now." So we've been kind of pushing them along that route.
Thank you, John.
So for 122 and on, our goal is to move to this process we've been calling the receipts process. So instead of using the enhancements tracking spreadsheet, and instead of doing the polling that we're doing, we're going to move to an opt-in sort of process where SIGs will open up a receipt, a piece of metadata that's in YAML form that links to which KEPs they're going to launch basically in what release. So there will be you'd open a PR to like the 122 release folder in the enhancements repo and say, KEP 1089 or whatever, the issue that matches up. That would be your intention to join the release. And we'll be able to keep track of things that have landed in the release, things that will be removed from the release and would require exceptions. Exception requests will become PRs to move those things back and forth with the appropriate approvals. This is going to allow us to remove more of that trivial work from the release team members. It'll allow us to do more automation and validation so we can make sure that like the milestone is targeted correctly inside of the KEP and do some updates to things automatically. There's a KEP in process right now that you can go and we'd ask you to go review. We would like to opt in and do this work during the 121 release. That will be some process changes, and it will be a lot of KEPCTL enhancements. We want to make a lot of this not manual, so people can just use the tooling to generate the receipt, so that we can use the tooling to generate a summary manifest that will replace the enhancements tracking spreadsheet. additions to KEP-val that'll do this validation for us. So we would like to get this PR, so this KEP approved by the exception, or sorry, by the enhancements freeze date, which is the 9th. So this is a takeaway action item for people. Please go review this KEP. Please leave any feedback. It's pretty detailed right now in listing out what the process will look like, and what the tooling will do has not been defined yet, but it's going to really just give automation to that process. We wanted to get the process defined in the KEP before we started writing the KEP-CTL updates. So we're going to do it hopefully during 121. We're trying to dry run it right now. Nabrun and I are doing some manual things. Just as things come into the spreadsheet, we're doing things in a fork, in a branch to just kind of track things and work through the process a little bit. And a lot of the work is going to end up being a revamp of KEP-CTL and KEP-val to just support this process a little bit more. Why change? I think we've covered all of this as we went through some of the problems in what's going to happen in 121. But really, we want to make things a little bit more transparent, a little bit more discoverable. Like right now, it's not really easy for people in the community to come and say, what's going to be in this release? They have to go click through the spreadsheet, and it's not super awesome. Once we put these things into GitHub as a source of truth, it'll be a lot easier for us to do things like maybe build a KEPs website, or maybe build a automatically generated release website that shows things that are in, things that are out, and just make it easier for people to sort of track. Okay, some other updates. Lori, go ahead.
Yeah, so we were talking about this earlier. I was actually thinking as we were talking, like, what about a kind of very simple toolkit to help SIGs along who are struggling with some of these alignment and communication issues? So just basically have a couple of simple things that SIGs can do to get going with, just to help themselves, really. But some of the things that we've tried in SIG release might be useful. For example, how we've delegated work and involved more contributors in the actual running of the group. So creating topic sponsors. These are basically tech leads or release managers who will drive a topic to get something complex that we've wanted done during a release cycle. And so this model could be adapted for SIGs that are overwhelmed with work to be able to create a group just looking out for their package of KEPs for the upcoming cycle. But that is basically what I've posted here. I've shared a spreadsheet before in shares and leads with some of these process improvement offerings. So if you want help with alignment or delegation or something else, happy to help. I've been a little busy recently in the last few months, but I'm still around, even more than usual, just a little more behind the scenes, and focusing on some of the SIG release process improvements, because we'd really like to show the community that we can make these things work. We can overcome some of the obstacles, and it would be great to extend what we've learned out to help other SIGs more directly, especially around this, because it's so important.
I think one cool thing that we saw as a takeaway from this is that SIG Node has actually been doing some of this planning. Super shout out to Elena. She dropped a link into the enhancements channel with a curated list of what they have that they're tracking so far, that they can then build their list for 121 and 122 off of. Super cool. SIG Node in general, I think, just did a really good job in 120 as well, with kind of coming together and making sure they had a good list of things that they wanted to get forward.
Yeah, exactly. So like when I was thinking of the toolkit idea, a lot of what Alana's doing, I think would be extremely helpful to show SIGs exactly how you can create a structure for contributors to, for example, use a GitHub project board and know exactly what to do, to understand what all the labels mean, and just help out. She's really reduced the friction around supporting a SIG around process. So if that's of interest, reach out, but I think I'll just make it anyway and then show people what it looks like, and then you can all decide if it's something you want to adopt. But it'll be just a collection of best practices that have been used throughout the ecosystem in the last few months to address this very topic of managing workflow and delegating it to others so that people don't burn out.
Cool. Thank you for that update, Lori. next up, two really quick, like kind of technical updates. So we have this tool called KEPCTL, and we haven't like super widely publicized it yet, but I think John and the PRR team have been using it to do queries to find things they need to review. We've been using it internally at VMware to do some reporting, just querying and stuff. There have been a few PRs that have gone in. They just wanted to give a shout out. We had a new contributor that did, I think, all of these. He's added some tests to it and added some abilities to do additional queries. So that's pretty cool. When we start doing the receipts process, we will add more functionality to this and make it more of a ready to consume tool. But right now, if you're curious and you want to query to find like what KEPs are available for my SIG, KEPCTL will do that for you, and it'll check PRs. It'll also check things that have been merged in. We added the ability to query for author, and Dryrun has added an extra output format. So it'll also generate like a CSV file if you're trying to get some new output formats. This one's a pretty big one. As we've been doing some of these changes, adding the KEP YAML, moving away from that single kind of markdown file to a more directory structure-based thing, we're ending up in the state where things are in various, on that continuum. Some things have not been updated yet. Some things have been updated yet. We've generally been trying to get people to update them or forcing them to update them for a release. So if KEP has been around for a while and they're going to try to land in 120 or 121, we made them go and update to that new format. And everybody was super responsive on that. There's a lot of things that have not been updated that way. Some people have been going and just doing random updates to the KEPs to move them to the new format, which is super great. But this is really leading us to a place where we're in an inconsistent state, and we have to do frequent updates to make sure the validation doesn't break on PRs. So Stephen is looking at how we can move to version the KEPs so that when the metadata is present, we can do validation based off of different, different versions. Make things a little bit easier, a little bit better to maintain going forward. There's an issue open here with a description of what we have in mind for this. Would encourage everybody to go read that. Stephen's also got a small work in progress PR, kind of moving things out of the KEP val structure into an API package that we can version and work with going forward. All right, so a lot of information that we've given you so far. If anybody is interested, Lori, do you want to talk about the meeting times or anything else?
Yeah, so we've really been able to get more and more momentum around the enhancement subproject overall. Like, we've had more people showing up to the meetings, but we will change the meeting time and day. Well, maybe not the day, but definitely the time. It doesn't work for Kirsten and many other people. So the link there is so that you can contribute your input. If you'd like to start joining these meetings, we have a doodle poll set up, and I'll extend that until next Tuesday, and then we'll take the findings and rework our meeting invite. But there's a lot we can actually do in enhancements, and arguably there's a lot we should do there. So if you're having struggles with the process, for example, it would be great if you or some delegate from your SIG would join us, and then we can talk about that issue. Or we've been talking about and actually getting a couple of product managers from different companies to join, and they may be able to help your SIG with some of the prioritization and just running of your meetings and refining your backlog so that you can manage your KEP backlog better, and maybe your backlog overall. They can provide prioritization strategies. They can help you validate the importance or the impact of KEPs. So if that's of interest, getting an actual product manager to join your SIG and just offer some of that guidance, then you can reach out in the channel, and we have a few that are part of the sub project now. We also could be doing some office hours type activities where we help authors of KEPs that are in your SIG, so you could match them or you could just direct them our way. If they would like to learn how to write really good KEPs, they could get that kind of advice through the Enhancements subproject. But I'd say start with any of your feedback in the Enhancements channel, and we can see if we can build some momentum, because it's historically been a rather quiet channel, which is a little bit surprising to me given how important enhancements are. to the evolution of this project. So maybe 2021 can be the year that we really make enhancements the place to be. And maybe we can even meet in person at some point when we can all travel again or something. But yes, for now, we can just socialize and coalesce on the channel and at the meetings and get it more active. We also have needs like the KEP tooling. You know, when we have a technical need, it often will wait for months because there just historically haven't been enough people with enough bandwidth to do that work. We have a lot of extremely busy people in that sub-project that are stretched across the project. So it's always an outlet for someone in your SIG who may just want to help keep Kubernetes running, who wants to help out with a task. You could send them our way if they're interested in how enhancements work and making the process better. That's up.
And I guess just for me as a note, like I've been involved now, I guess in enhancements for a year, and I just see a lot more people involved with the release team sticking around and really like caring about what's happening and
absolutely
like wanting to help authors and wanting to help SIGs and wanting to really try to get a process that's sustainable. So it's like we're all, I think, on the same team, like trying to push this to something that really works. And there's like a huge, there's just like a huge desire to make it better. And I haven't like seen that until now. So I'm super optimistic about 2021. Like there's so much energy and there's so much like goodwill and like desire to put in that little bit of effort to make things better. That's like, at least for me, pretty exciting. So.
Yeah, seconded. I mean, a lot of it was Kirsten's work, driving enhancements to the next level. We've had great retros, you know, Jeremy, Nabrun running, Taylor running the release cycles, and we've been collecting a lot of the feedback and not just collecting it, but organizing the release team and then the broader SIG and some of the sub-projects to actually act on that feedback. So we don't let those issues kind of linger around indefinitely anymore. They're getting acted upon, and that cycle is shortened significantly. When I showed up last spring, there was a backlog of 100 items that were related to process improvements, and they're gone. Like we either bunched them with other things, or we just did them, or we found a simpler way to knock out 20 items that were all pointing toward the same basic desire to make something better. So this has been such an amazing and inspiring group effort. So I echo what Kirsten's saying. We could definitely do this. It's because of all the people that are involved. It's a lot of creativity.
So thanks a lot, Laurie, Kirsten, Jeremy. Thanks for giving us an update here. Yeah, I always worry about, you know, whether we can do this for the long haul. So getting more people, especially newer people involved on the tooling side, website, those kinds of things will be really useful. There is a flip side to this too, which we haven't done really well yet, which is actually a set of people going and reading the KEPs and doing things, you know, so we don't end up burning out people like Timech or Liggett. You know, they are always completely blasted the week before the feature freeze. So we have to do some set of things around that for 122, but I think for 121, this is awesome. So let's continue the good work. Thank you.
Yeah, Tims, can you provide a little more info for that, like to set up that, like that's something we can get ahead of for 122, if you can provide some of the concerns, like what, you know, what could go wrong, and then we can try to work backward to, you know, get ahead of that and prevent.
Yeah, I'll show up in the next meeting, Laurie, and we can.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great.
To add on that, I've struggled with two facets of the flow of KEPs, not the process, but there's the existence of them. One is finding the ones that are interesting to me, or the ones that I can have meaningful impact on. And the second is not being looped into the ones that I don't have meaningful impact on. Right? People assign all sorts of random stuff to me because apparently I can still approve just about anything. But a lot of times I'm like, I just don't know what's going on with this KEP. Like, this is news to me. I didn't know we were doing this. And I have yet to find a good way to filter that.
Yeah, we did. Jim and a few others and I did a KEP reading group a year ago maybe, and that was the biggest problem, was just identifying the ones that we really want to put some focus on. I don't know, like KEP control could do some querying and filtering and slicing and dicing, but I just don't know. This is like, after you read it, you know whether you want to know about it or not. I don't know if there's an easy way to do that.
Clearly, we need an AI model that learns from people's past comments as to what they're interested in, and then auto maps.
There you go.
I'll write a KEP for it.
Yeah. I mean, I just have a spreadsheet where I spent some of the holiday break just capturing the descriptions, just so that I could just do that. Like, okay, what is going on with these KEPs? But we don't want to have that as being the only option. It'd be great to have something that would just give you that quick view of KEPs. Like you could skim and say, yep, nope. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
I try not to inject my. Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I was going to say KEP control can give you that quick view, right? It's just a tool that you can slice and dice.
I think it could, if you have the one-line description.
I'll take a New Year's resolution to learn to use KEPCuttle as my first step, not the web UI.
Do we have a short tutorial once it's ready to tutorial on how to use it? Because that could be really helpful. And then I think the group could offer some feedback on what else that tool could do, provide some user stories.
Yeah, for sure.
I hate swooping into a KEP at in the late stages and saying, oh, I think you're completely off target here, and then like dive bombing people's work. But I also there's no way that every week I can scan through all the open KEPs and see what's interesting to me and then provide meaningful feedback. So personally, I'm trying to find a balance here.
Okay, we are out of time. So I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, and great work for the enhancements team. Really, it's awesome to see this moving forward so much. And we will see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.